Just a brief reminder about Teisho. Teisho is not a lecture, it's a form of practice. So the old admonition is practice with the Teisho. Don't mull it over. Think of it as something that's directed to you alone. You're not part of an audience. This is something being spoken directly to you alone. And if you're working on a koan, you continue working on the koan. Those doing breath practice become one with the Teisho. In other words, just listen. If you find yourself mulling over it, you'll find the Teisho has moved on. So you just kind of breathe with it. You don't continue counting. That would be a little too complex. But you just breathe with the Teisho. In other words, you practice it. Allow the words in like the sound of leaves in the trees or like the caw of a crow. They're just there and then they're gone. And you're fully with it, but you're not thinking about it. Of course, thoughts will arise, but you continue just being present with the Teisho as your practice. You can move during Teisho quietly if you need to change your posture. Just do so attentively. In other words, don't say, oh, I've got to get this change made real quick so I don't. No, just attentively change your posture if you need to. Be attentive to the process of, oh, there's pain in your knee, and so you change your posture, whatever you need to do. Okay, that's basically on Teisho. So on the practice of Teisho. Today, I'd like to take up again a series we've been doing, reading and from and commenting on some of the essays in Robert Aitken Roshi's original dwelling place. We did some very good ones, one on death, one on koans and their study. Aitken Roshi is always a lucid and skillful voice. So today we'll look at the experience of emptiness, use and misuse. Zen Buddhism is by definition indefinable, and in the context of its study, nothing, not even nothing, can be defined. In the Diamond Sutra, we are told that there is no formulation of consummate truth. The Buddha himself, herself, or itself cannot be distinguished by any characteristic whatsoever. Wangpo says, this spiritually enlightening nature is without beginning, as ancient as the void, subject neither to birth nor to destruction, neither existing nor not existing, neither impure nor pure, neither clamorous nor silent, neither old nor young, occupying no space, having neither inside nor outside, size nor form, color nor sound. It cannot be looked for or sought. It cannot be looked for or sought. So interesting, isn't that? Comprehended by wisdom or knowledge, it can't be comprehended. Explained in words, contacted materially, or reached by meritorious achievement. All the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, with all wriggling things possessed of life, share in this great nirvanic nature. That's Wangpo, one of our great Tong era teachers. You may be familiar with him as a terrific student from case number 2 in the Wumenguan Gateless Barrier, Bai Chong's Fox, where Wangpo is Bai Chong's student. And steps right up with a terrific challenge and interchange. Anyway, despite such vivid caution, some students understand this empty nature conceptually and risk getting stuck in an undifferentiated place where correct and incorrect are the same, where male and female are the same, where all configurations disappear into a kind of pudding. The great teachers of the past addressed this risk directly. The Venerable Yan Yang asked Zhao Chu, when one has brought not a single thing, what then? Zhao Chu said, put it down. When one has brought not a single thing, what then? Zhao Chu said, put it down. When you cling to nothing as something, then you yourself are not truly empty, and the emptiness you cherish is no more than an idea. With this notion of emptiness, you can be persuaded that the homeless are an illusion. The rainforests are not being destroyed. There are no traditional peoples who are dying out. There is no one freezing or starving or dying from shrapnel in places around the world. When you run over a child with your car, there is no child after all. Put down that not a single thing, or your successors will use it to enhance and support brutality and imperialism. This is a real challenge. People who might have some experience of emptiness and think it means there's nothing. It's quite a monstrous misunderstanding. Subtle as it is, it has consequences. So, indeed, for some of our ancestors and contemporaries, the mental discipline of Zen can be divorced from the compassion and wisdom of Buddhism. The Dharma becomes like a potted plant. So long as it is not hindered, it can be moved around and allowed to flower and bear fruit anywhere. The eminent scholar D.T. Suzuki is open to criticism on this point, where he writes, Zen has no special doctrine or philosophy, no set of concepts or intellectual formulas, except that it tries to release one from the bondage of birth and death by means of certain intuitive modes of understanding peculiar to itself. It is therefore extremely flexible in adapting itself to almost any philosophy and social doctrine as long as its intuitive teaching is not interfered with. It may be found wedded to anarchism or fascism, communism or democracy, atheism or idealism, or any political or economic dogmatism. It is, however, generally animated with a certain revolutionary spirit, and when things come to a deadlock, as they do, when we are overloaded with conventionalism, formalism, and other cognate isms, Zen asserts itself and proves to be a destructive force. The spirit of the Kamakura era was in this respect in harmony with the virile spirit of Zen. Aitken Roshi comments, is the social responsibility of Zen limited to the destruction of convention? Of course, it is important not to get locked into formal propriety, but is breaking out our only function? Is there really something to be called Zen that can accommodate itself to fascism? Please take a minute and stand up and shout, no! In any case, Aitken Roshi continues, surely there are conventional social standards and political and economic structures that are in keeping with the Buddha's vision of harmony. With all respects to my dear old sensei, and Aitken Roshi knew D.T. Suzuki and respected him deeply, I would step down from my podium, abandon my heritage and my Sangha, and wander as a rootless pilgrim if I agreed with the perspective of Zen Buddhism that he sets forth here. Indeed, I must say, think of Kapla Roshi, who was the chief court reporter for the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunals and for the Tokyo War Crimes Tribunals. He took down the testimony of some of the greatest horrors of immediate current 20th century and underlying 21st century society. It is what brought him to Zen. The horrors of what people human beings like you and I can do when unmediated by ethics, compassion, and wisdom. This is the foundation of our Zen practice. The desire to stand up for and bring into being wisdom and compassion, not anything and not nothing. Compare Dr. Suzuki's words with those of the Dalai Lama, who understands very well how all forms are empty of substance and how at the same time they come forth precious in themselves. In his public talks, he declares again and again, like Torei Zenji, that even our so-called enemies can be our teachers. Torei, of course, was Hakuin's great heir, and sometimes he's known as Torei Enji, which was his name, sometimes as Torei Zenji, which means great teacher. Torei Enji, or Torei Zenji's Bodhisattva's vow, which Aitken Roshi is referring here to, that even our enemies, what's he say exactly? So-called enemies can be our teachers, is the core of Torei's Bodhisattva's vow. And we read this vow in unison aloud every morning of Sesshin and at the morning of our Zazen Kais. It goes like this: I am only a simple disciple, but I offer these respectful words. When I regard the true nature of the many dharmas, I find them all to be sacred forms of the Tathagata's never-failing essence. Each particle of matter, each moment, is no other than the Tathagata's inexpressible radiance. With this realization, our virtuous ancestors gave tender care to beasts and birds with compassionate minds and hearts. Among us, in our own daily lives, who is not reverently grateful for the protections of life, food, drink, and clothing? Though they are inanimate things, they are nonetheless the warm flesh and blood, the merciful incarnations of Buddha. All the more we can be especially sympathetic and affectionate with foolish people, particularly with someone who becomes a sworn enemy and persecutes us with abusive language. That very abuse conveys the Buddha's boundless loving kindness. It is a compassionate device to liberate us entirely from the mean-spirited delusions we have built up with our wrongful conduct from the beginningless past. With our open response to such abuse, we completely relinquish ourselves, and the most profound and pure faith arises. At the peak of each thought, a lotus flower opens, and on each flower there is revealed a Buddha. Everywhere is the Pure Land in its beauty. We see fully the Tathagata's radiant light right where we are. May we retain this mind and extend it throughout the world so that we and all beings become mature in Buddha's wisdom. Torei Enji clearly and most deeply realized vast emptiness, nothing to be called holy. And yet, he doesn't talk about emptiness. He presents wisdom, humility, and compassion. Zen is not nothing. Nothing is not nothing. Nothing is quite full. This is the true teaching of the Buddha. All beings come forth sacred in their suchness. And it is my responsibility, and yours, says Aitken Roshi, to make this clear. Adversaries, enemies, as metaphors, and as folks out there in opposition to us, are not merely empty. They are the Buddha. When I experience myself as an empty Buddha, I am large, a boundless container of multitudes. As Walt Whitman said, I contain multitudes. The challenge is to forget myself, to let my body and mind drop away, and to encourage the body and mind of others to drop away, and to continue this dropping away endlessly, as Dogen Zenji has said. then my practice of including more and more others will be endless too. How do you forget yourself? It's simple. What is Mu? We forget ourselves by absorbing ourselves in the practice. We don't suppress ourselves. We don't try and get rid of ourselves. We let it fall away, absorbing ourselves in the practice. Dr. Suzuki was not the first to declare Zen to be something that could be used for authoritarian ends. The Kamakura shogunate was very impressed by the Zen teachers who had taken refuge in Japan from the turmoil in China at the end of the Sung dynasty, and encouraged these teachers and their immediate Japanese successors to adapt the teachings to needs of the samurai. Addressing one of these samurai in his Sangha, Takuan Soho Zenji used Zen terminology to sanitize bloodshed. The uplifted sword has no will of its own. It is all of emptiness. The man who is about to be struck down is also of emptiness, as is the one who wields the sword. Aitken Roshi comments, emptiness indeed. What about the blood? What about the wails of the widow and her children? Empty too, I suppose. It must be said that this is Buddhist antinomianism. That is the practice of not being willing to identify emptiness as form. It's this tree, a maple. It's this star, Arcturus. It's this person. Hey, Joe. It's the refusal to allow emptiness to be form. Emptiness indeed. What about the blood? To be fair to Takuan Zenji, he offered his advice within the context of Japanese Buddhism, which was founded by Shotoku Taishi in the 7th century as a means of maintaining the political structure of the country. Moreover, he was not the first to declare deadly violence to be empty and therefore acceptable. In the Hindu scriptures, we find Krishna advising Arjuna that there is no killer and no one to be killed. Now, of course, that's, I believe, in the central chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. It is a very powerful presentation, but we can do better. We can do better. We can be truer. It's hard to say because there's such profundity in those ancient Hindu scriptures, and yet the upholding of wisdom and compassion is our responsibility. Not just empty wisdom, but compassionate engagement. We also find such ideas flowering in the words and deeds of samurai after Takuan's time. For example, in those of Miyamoto Musashi and Yamaka Teshu, and today in the teachings and practice found in the international Zen dojo movement in Japan and in the West. It is our task, it seems to me, to take up Buddhism as a religion of infinite compassion, which Dr. Suzuki, at his best, realized very clearly. One of the great images of classical Buddhism is that of the 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara. What a stunning image of totally engaged compassion, of wisdom as compassion, each of the 1,000 hands with an eye in it, reaching out skillfully, guided by wisdom, to do the most appropriate thing, to be of total benefit, total care, total engagement. This is one of Buddhism's great, great images, compiling or compressing a tremendous amount of wisdom and compassion in one stunning visual image. As you know, at our Zendo, we have several versions of the Thousand Armed Avalokiteshvara because I find it such a compelling image, and always have. Interestingly, on our China pilgrimage in 2006, we went to Rinzai's temple, and Rinzai, or Linji in Chinese, as you know, was a firebrand. Kill the Buddha, should he appear. He was fierce, Dharma, eye and voice, and yet, here's the stunning thing, we discovered that where he gave his Teishos, he sat in front of a huge, maybe 30 foot high, 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara. In other words, he was presenting these incredibly concise wisdom and compassion teachings in front of a stupendous, and it was gold, red, blue, almost like Tibetan image of the Bodhisattva of compassion with 1,000 helping hands. That is the invisible context of Rinzai's fierce teaching. If you only know his texts, you would never, ever know that. And we were told the original had been destroyed during the Cultural Revolution, but this was a replica there at the time of Linji's teaching. So that was one of the most important discoveries in our pilgrimage to China in 2006, to see that and realize the context of compassion that even the fiercest Zen teaching was emerging from and presenting. When you don't know that, you can get very zen-y, thinking doing spontaneous and very dynamic things are somehow more zen than quietly saying good morning to your partner. So, the Buddhist teachings, I'm sorry, let's go on to yeah. If all beings, hold on, let's see. Where are we? Have I lost my place? Yes. Okay. As an accomplished Zen student said to me recently, the experience of profound emptiness is at once the experience of great compassion, not nihilism. Great compassion is the experience, the genuine experience of emptiness. That's right, says Aitken Roshi. And the samurai Zen people are wrong. Do you say there is no right or wrong? He says, wrong! To which I say, right! On the traditional Zen Buddhist altar, Shakyamuni occupies the center seat. Manjushri, the incarnation of great wisdom, sits on one side. Samantabhadra, the incarnation of great action, sits on the other. These archetypes and their positions can be profoundly meaningful for the Buddhist pilgrim. The great wisdom of Manjushri, great Buddhist, by the way, Buddhist pilgrim means you and me, all of us journeying along the Buddha way. That's who the Buddhist pilgrim is that he's referring to. The great wisdom of Manjushri is the realization that everything is totally empty, vacant, void, that is, of self-centeredness, of isolation, of self-concern. Nothing abides, not the body, not the self, not the soul. With this realization, one finds vast and joyous liberation, as we learn in the Four Noble Truths. Many people get hung up in thinking in Zen somehow that I am going to get enlightened. No, you won't get enlightened. You will step off center stage and the world will step in and be enlightened as you. The star steps in, the puppy steps in, the piece of shit on the sidewalk steps in. The broken glass steps in. The flower steps in. I don't get enlightened. In her great action, Samanta Bahadra wields skillful means of demeanor, words, and deeds to turn the Dharma wheel with all beings. We devote ourselves to uncovering her talent as our own and to encouraging others to liberate themselves. This is our responsibility. It doesn't reside with teachers or priests or any intermediaries. It is up to each one of us. Here, I received a lay ordination from Danon Henry Roshi, who was combining his Kaplo lineage with his Diamond Sangha Aitken Roshi background. But in the Diamond Sangha, in fact, there is no ordination. In Aitken Roshi's line, there's no ordination at all. Each person is fully responsible, just as they are, for upholding the Dharma and encouraging wisdom and compassion to be in this world. It's each of us. The position of these images on the Zen Buddhist altar recalls the Buddha Shakyamuni beneath the Bodhi tree, realizing the true nature of all things and arising to seek out his old friends. My teacher Yasutani Hakon Roshi used to begin his orientation to Zen practice with the Buddha's great realization. Wonderful, wonderful! Now I see that all beings are the Tathagata. That is, all beings come forth as the Buddha himself, herself, itself. Only their delusions and preoccupations keep them from testifying to this fact. That's it. That's it. If all beings are inherently Buddha, and if we follow the way of Shakyamuni and encourage others to realize and testify to this fact, then surely the next step is to take positions of compassionate resistance to fascism and other repressive systems, and to search out alternate structures for the application of the Buddhist experience, of our own experience. Now, this talk was given in 1994 by Aitken Roshi, by the way, at a conference of Buddhists and Christians for Justice, Peace, and the Integrity of the Earth in Switzerland in 1994. When you think of having to face issues of fascism in the United States today, for 26 years after this, is just unbelievable. But Aitken Roshi was speaking out against fascism back in 1994. And here it is in our face every day in our own United States. We have a lot of work to do. The Buddhist teachings include the Brahma Viharas, the noble abodes of loving kindness, compassion, joy, liberation of others, and equanimity or impartiality. These are the sacred, noble abodes, the Brahma Viharas. This is loving kindness, compassion, joy in the liberation of others, and equanimity or impartiality. These four modes of selfless practice form part of the jhana paramita, the perfection of settled, focused meditation. This is where Zen gets its name. In India, it was jhana, focused meditation. In China, that was chana. In Japan, that became Zen. Our very name means focused, settled meditation. Monks and nuns in ancient times absorbed themselves in these four ideals as practice on their cushions. As Buddhism evolves and our understanding matures, however, I think we can see that jhana is not just temple practice. Everything in the world is in jhana. Even people in a mental hospital are absorbed, not on a productive track maybe, but still they are immersed in their crazy ways. The dog is absorbed in being a dog, the stone in being a stone. We can also see that loving kindness and the other Brahma Viharas are more than just meditation themes. When we devote ourselves to the Buddha way, we practice loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity in the market and in our households. These ancient ideals inspire us as we write to our friends and as we greet Mormons when they come to the door to missionize. We internalize these ideals and extend tender care as Tori Zenji advises us to beasts and birds, and indeed to plants, pancakes, orange juice, and undershirt. The haiku poet Isa wrote, "Don't kill it. The fly wrings its hands. It wrings its feet. Don't kill it. The fly wrings its hands, wrings its feet." Blake has a little verse, if I can remember it, that's so much like Isa. He says something like something about if life is thought and something and breath, and lack of thought is death. That is, when there are no thoughts, there's no self. If lack of thought is death, then am I a happy fly if I live or if I die. If thought is life and health and breath, and lack of thought is death, then am I a happy fly if I live or if I die. Samanta Bahadra, busy turning her wheel of wisdom and compassion, would be disappointed with the folks who veer off into philosophical nihilism or political expedience. I believe she would want to step beyond even Tori Zenji and Kobayashi Isa in our modern times, for we as citizens of the world face serious, socially systemic problems. If we are to find peace in emptiness, if we are to take responsibility for our lives, then what is to be done? Great action, certainly, to the limits of our talent and beyond. But what action? It seems to me that the way of the future for Buddhists and their friends lies at three levels of re-empowerment: the personal, the communal, and the global. First, at the personal level, you and I must put aside any dependence we might have on others to do our religious work for us and take responsibility for the practice of emptying ourselves so that we may fill ourselves with all beings. Emptiness is full. Everything and everyone steps in when I'm off center stage. This is the essential point of all of Dogen's Zen. To become one with the 10,000 things is called delusion. To allow the 10,000 things to step in and realize themselves as the self is intimacy or realization. Moreover, we can encourage this ancient, authentic practice among others. This is rigorous, exacting work and requires the guidance of someone who has traveled the path before. At one of our ecos, turning over of merits, we say something about to all are many guides along the ancient way. I once wrote that the Buddha was a great autodidact, that is, self-taught, but really he wasn't. He lived with the best teachers of his time before he experimented with asceticism and meditation. Then, when he could stand on his own feet, he did not speak from a vacuum. The wisdom of his old teachers, however transformed and transmuted, informed his words. We can be sure. The good teacher is necessary for two reasons. She or he will encourage you and offer you guidance. She or he will also deny you the complacency of a plateau and urge you on to the peak of your potential and even beyond. Too often I meet with people who have the confidence that comes with the spontaneous spiritual experience outside any discipline or practice. When I check them and tell them not enough, They tend to become angry and to argue. Sometimes they disappear, that is, they leave, which is too bad. So faith in the teacher is important. If she is worth her salt, she knows, and you must swallow hard and accept the fact that you probably don't have it yet. The human tendency is to be satisfied with a milestone, but there are milestones after milestones without end. One of the great contributions of Zen Buddhism to world religion can be summed up with the words, not yet, not enough, not yet enough. It's also said that Shakyamuni Buddha himself is only halfway there. Those are stunning words to realize how vast our potential actually is. Absolutely stunning when you think about it. Second, at the communal level, we can turn to the Buddhist Sangha for our re-empowerment. Speaking, by the way, of halfway there, there's a verse I want to share with you that I think is one of the most beautiful in all Zen Buddhism, and is from the Denkoroku, Keizon's Denkoroku transmission number 6. And the verse by Keizon Jokin, who is a brilliant poet, goes like this. Though you may find clear waters reaching to the vast blue sky in autumn, how can it compare to the hazy moon on a spring night? Most people want it pure white, but sweep as you will, you can never empty the mind. Though you may find clear waters ranging or reaching to the vast blue sky in autumn, how can it compare with a hazy moon on a spring night? Most people want it pure white, but sweep as you will, you can never empty the mind. Not enough, not yet enough, not enough yet. Endlessly, endlessly. Second, as I said, at the communal level, we can turn to the Buddhist Sangha for our re-empowerment. It is clear that the Buddha considered the Sangha to be the only possible mode of universal resolution, or realization, In his day and in his tradition down to modern times, the lay community has supported the Sangha of ordained monks and thus encouraged the growth and spread of the Dharma. But here we appear as Mahayana students in modern times. The lay community is the Sangha, including spouses and children. We can encourage each other as parents, Sangha members, and citizens to stand together and resist the benighted forces that are destroying cultures and ruining the planet. We sit together, we practice together. This togetherness is the foundation of Sangha. Please participate in your way, wherever you are, by practicing together with all beings and with your fellow Sangha members. Aitken Roshi, and maybe a pure Soto ritual that we do here, which comes from the Diamond Sangha training that I did, which is when we come to our seat in the Zendo, our place, and you do this, please do this at home. When you come to where you're going to sit, you bow to your mat, then you turn, and completely opposite from your mat, you bow again to the extended Sangha. The point is that the Buddha did this so alone. He moved past his teachers very early on, and then was out beyond what anybody had realized at his time. And he did it alone, which is just extraordinary. It's hard to believe. We, unlike the Buddha, when we bow, first of all, like the Buddha, when we bow to our seat, we're bowing to the place where we're going to do our Buddha work. It's like the Buddha bowing to the spot under the Bodhi tree where he sat and did his work. So first we bow to our seat, which is the Bodhi Manda, the center of the universe, the place where each one of us is going to do our work of practice realization. And then we turn and bow out because, unlike the Buddha, we're not alone. We have a Sangha that we're part of, that energizes us and that we participate in and energize with our own practice. Unlike the Buddha, we are not alone in this. And this is a really important little ritual that puts that in place every time we sit. So finally, at the global level of re-empowerment, we can take responsibility as citizens of the world by finding within ourselves the seeds of other religions and cultures, then nurturing those seeds and encouraging them to grow and bear fruit. In other words, it's not just to think that everybody should be a Zen Buddhist. Everybody should do their best as they are. If you're drawn to Zen Buddhism, then that is your platform, your way of doing it. But we certainly can honor and respect all the other paths that are out there. Compassion is our guide. The mental discipline of Zen is really spiritual and cannot be divorced from its Buddhist roots. We must see clearly when others attempt to use the experience of emptiness inconsistently with the Buddhist teachings. By the way, that point, mental discipline of Zen is really spiritual and cannot be divorced from its Buddhist roots. This is so interesting coming from Aitken Roshi, who's one of his main teachers and his final teacher, the teacher who was his transmission teacher, was Yamada Koan Roshi, a student of Yasutani Roshi. Yamada was sanctioning many Christian priests and nuns as Zen teachers. So it's so interesting. Aitken Roshi's own teacher was separating Zen from its Buddhist roots. And there are many good Zen teachers now in the world through Yamada who are Christian. So I think what Aitken Roshi is saying from its spiritual roots, from roots that lie in wisdom and compassion, not nihilism. In any case, at such times, we must remember our heritage and the rationale of discipline. Back to A.J. Muste, peace is the way.